friends. And well, what do you do when you have a cold and you're supposed to be on the radio? Well, obviously, I have a cold. And it does lower my voice a bit, which is usually a good quality in radio, but this is hardly a good voice for radio, and so I'm not going to be on the radio very long today. On the other hand, it does come up, brings up, reminds me of some of the interesting ideas that I have had when I am in a situation like I'm in today. I want to be on the radio. I may even have to be on the radio, and I have a cold. Something is in the way of me doing what I'm supposed to do. And so if you'll just grant me a few minutes, maybe I can be helpful to you with an interesting idea or two about what you do when you are, hey, on the radio and you have a bad cold. Program begins right now. Well, of course, it's happened before in my many years of radio work, and it may happen again. Even though I always take measures to try and avoid it, here I am, and this is a cold time. And of course, it is the usual, of course, runny nose, congestion, cough, sore throat, all of those aggravating, not life-threatening by any means, usually, all those make you miserable conditions that come with a cold. Well, let me tell you some of the stories about that, and sometimes, of course, what you have to do. Well, first of all, if you can, you would, if you're in a major radio operation, you might see if you can find a substitute, somebody on staff who perhaps could do the program for you. And that would work. Well, it may be that you don't have anybody who will do the work for you. And you have to be on the radio, even though your voice is kind of cracking and it's certainly not up to its best. And it's certainly, maybe for some of your listeners, a bit distracting. What do you do? Well, of course, in traditional radio, you may play a lot of music, Now, we can't do that. We are not licensed to play a lot of music. But you could do that and just simply kind of wander through your program, playing commercials and playing music, and not talking very much, because even as I'm talking now, I can kind of feel that it's kind of going down on my throat now, and it's it's going to be a little bit raw because of what I'm doing in this next 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. And of course, that is a caution to me that I probably shouldn't keep doing that very long, because now I may make my cold worse. But you have to do it because you are on the radio. Now, what this has led me to experience, at least in my own spirit and mind when this has happened, first of all, for good health, I'm grateful. Many of us can do many things, but there may be certain things that we cannot do in our work because of the condition of our bodies and because of the condition of our senses. I would think, well, what if I would lose the ability to speak? That could happen. Well, my job would depend on that, and so I would be out of work. So the great gift of being able just simply to open my mouth and express myself and hopefully do it reasonably well, that's a real gift. And so I should very much guard that, and I should be very, very grateful that I have that gift, and hopefully honor it, and hopefully do my best to make sure that I can continue on in the work I love. The second thing that always came to me was, hey, is what you're going to say really that important? I always, here we do. Now, I know radio people, I know them all over. And there is the proverbial that, of course, I've said this, to be on the radio, you have to have a certain ego. And that ego is, first of all, you have to actually believe that you have something worthwhile to say. I mean, that you really do have something that's worthwhile to say. The second part of your ego is that you actually believe that somebody might be interested in what you have to say. Now, of course, you're interested in it, but you actually believe that somebody else might be interested? Well, if you pass that test, then you got to try and pass, at least for me, the third test, and that uh, is it important or useful to them in any way? And so that kind of, when you have a cold, I have to ask the question, is what I'm going to say worth saying? Is what I'm going to say worth listening to? And is what am I going to say going to do anybody any good at all? And you know what? That's a good test for life. So whenever I'm in this condition, I'm reminded of that threefold test about opening your mouth. Does this need to be said? Does anybody want to hear it? And will it do anybody any good? So I'm always reminded of that because that's the deal. And also, I'm grateful that I can do it and that, of course, I will recover from this and can press on. That was why I was, fascinated by, and the story was very, very keen to me at least, when Rush Limbaugh, of course, the radio guy, and whether you liked him or not, whether you hated him or loved him, and usually people had one of two opinions about him. Here is a fact. The man knew how to use the radio media. Whether you are right or left, whatever it might be, but in terms of being successful and using the media, he knew how to do it. And he had no college education, hated school, and he just went in and did what he loved as still a child, really. I think he was 16 or 17, and got fired, went on, got fired, went on, got fired, went on, got fired, and then, of course, he finally made it and made it big time. But he lost his hearing. Now, it wasn't that he just became hard of hearing, he lost it. Well, what do you do when you can't listen to people, when you can't, you have listeners on the phone? What do you do when you can't hear? And when you can't hear, it makes it even harder sometimes to be able to speak clearly because you may not be able to hear in some way your own voice. And the fact that you have headphones doesn't do you any good. What do you do? Well, I was fascinated to see how hard he had to work to try in some way to recover through the cochlear implants. And that's a complicated and expensive and very, I guess, could be dangerous surgery in the fact that they could make it even worse sometimes. He went through, and till the end of his day, he was on the radio speaking the truth. Obviously, the cancer took a number of situations. He lost a lot of weight. He obviously suffered a great deal in many ways, though he became, as he would say, a much more gentle and softer man as the expressions of love and good wishes came to him. But the idea, what would you do if you lost a real unique part of yourself that is vital to you making a living? How would you handle that? Well, that's the kind of the second thing I would always think about when I had this situation. Well, okay, there we go. Now I'm ready for number three, and then I'm going to quit. All right? Hopefully, those have been helpful. But now, number three, when you're going through situations like this, what are you reminded of? Well, that'll be number three, and that will be the end of me, but we'll come back and do just that. Okay, here we go. Hardship. Um, I'm going through some real hardships right now. I'm kind of living on the edge, as I said. Some things have come to me that are difficult, and some things are challenging me, which I wasn't really wanting to have happen to me. For the most part, I think my health is good, and that's great. It's just this kind of cold right now, but other than that, but there are other things that are bothering me. And so let me just read you a little story a bit of a book I have called Streams in the Desert, and it's um, a book written 100 years ago. That's right. Well, maybe 99. I think it was 25. 1925, I believe it was published. But who's counting when it's that close? And he's talking particularly about the idea that we go through difficulty. Um, our spiritual and physical conflicts are among the most wonderful blessings, someone says. Thank God for the battle. How can we be more than conquerors if we don't have a conflict and a enemy and an obstacle to overcome? How can we achieve greatness if we don't have great bad things happen to us? Here's how it continued. A noted scientist, observing that the early sailors believed that the coral-building animals instinctively built up the great reefs of the atoll islands in order to protect themselves in the inner waterways. And this was proven to be wrong. What has now been known for some time is these organisms can only live and thrive facing the open ocean in the highly oxygenated foam of the combative waves. It is commonly thought that a protected and easy life is the best way to live. Yeah, yeah. I remember the man who just said, all I want is a comfortable retirement. Well, that's a big thing to ask at this age and stage. I just want to be protected and have an easy life. Yet, as the writer goes on, yet the lives of all of the noblest and strongest people prove exactly the opposite, and that the endurance of hardship is the making of the great person. It is indeed the factor that distinguishes between merely existing and living a vigorous life. Hardship builds character. Full stop. That's the deal. That's true. Live with it and embrace it and use it. I'm Stan Houston, signing off with my cold, with just a few thoughts that at least happen to me when I endure a season of the cold. Love to hear from you. StanHouston@gmail.com. StanHouston@gmail.com. All the best and blessings to you. I'll be back in maybe a few days, hopefully with a little less bass and perhaps a little less aggravating noise. Take care. indeed. Best in blessings. And if you're going through the hard times, hang on, be there, one step at a time, one trusting step at a time, and believe that in the end, all will be well. Bye for now.